Hi, I'm Sarah Wilder, and this is part 18 of Surviving the Man I Married. In part 17, you heard about the first half of 2021 and that we took a trip to Montana to get a new puppy and all the other crap that flowed downhill and right into my house in the first part of that year. In this episode, you're going to hear the rest of that story of our trip to Montana. And I have to talk fast because it's kind of a long episode. Jim's New Boots, part 1. So we're at the Beaver Boosting Best Western in Dillon, Montana, there to pick up my new mini dachshund puppy, Rosie, the very cure for my shattered heart. And a side note, a former boss of mine and a very serious crush from the mid 1980s was buried in Dillon, Montana. His name was Grant. He died of cancer in 2017, and his spirit participated in my third reading with Peter. And he also said that when he's near me, it smells like campfire smoke. I found that so funny because the moment I discovered Grant's obituary online, probably about 6 months before that reading that he participated in, I smelled smoke all around me that very moment. I even asked Jim if he could smell smoke, which he couldn't. Um, in 1987, I nearly left Jim for Grant. So that was kind of a big deal. After grabbing a quick free breakfast at our hotel, we drove 20 minutes north to Butte, where my precious baby angel awaited my arrival. Gently, I placed that tiny little cargo on a blanket in the huge back seat of our double cab pickup. And at first, our old dog with the silver muzzle lay in his car seat ignoring her. But within minutes, her sleepy curiosity and her affectionate nuzzles just melted his heart. And by the time we got back to Dillon, they were technically cuddling with each other. I have videos of this. It's just so lovely. We drove around looking for a place that was open for lunch and had food. I was so hungry and I needed something that wouldn't kill me. Any kind of corn and soy are the greatest threats. I'm horribly allergic. This town had the quietest Saturday morning I'd seen in a while, not since Idaho. I don't think old Dillon, Montana unrolls its sidewalks until sometime in the afternoon. But I found an ambitious little pizza place slash bar adjacent pool hall that had a fantastic menu, and they opened it up a half hour early just for me. That's gold club level service in my book. Jim waited in the truck with the dogs and his ever present mobile phone for 20 or so minutes while they prepared my food. And he actually didn't want anything to eat, which is so odd because that man always eats, and he eats a lot. Same old Jim and I had almost made it through 15 hours in Montana without anything bad or weird happening. Then it came time for me to eat the lunch for which I'd so diligently foraged. I thought Jim then would maybe drive us home while I enjoyed my bespoke pastrami Reuben, but instead he wanted to go shopping. He wanted to pop into a nearby boot store, leaving me to eat alone in the car. And you know what? No, I wasn't having it. I protested. I said, the logistics of the trip and then my throbbing in the foot and lower leg from sitting in the car for so long. But man, he launched into an all cylinders narcissist offensive to get himself into that store. He propped it up on his enthusiasm for Western history. That's true. Promised not to buy anything and just to have a quick look around. And the way we were parked, I could see the boot store. It was like a block ahead, and it wasn't just any store. This place had character, history, style, was unapologetically touristy. I mean, it looked like someone plucked it right out of Jackson Hole Town Square and plopped it into this little sedated 70s TV show cattle town. It looked cool. Jim was just chomping at the bit, so I set him loose. And before my little swollen hands could pop the lid on the clamshell to eat my food, he plopped himself out of the truck and hoofed the 50 yards to the entrance like a kid to a candy store. Lying Liar was gone for over 45 minutes. So much for that quick look around. When his gargantuan melon, outsized only by his keggish midsection, emerged from the darkened interior of the store, he was beaming from ear to ear, and he was carrying a large bag that was swinging at his side in rhythm to his oddly animated gait. No surprise here, he broke both promises, and he could not possibly have looked more happy about it. Jim went into that store, and it's the cowboy who came out. When enraged, man, my Scorpio will not permit me to hide emotion, and my face was conveying plenty of emotion. I didn't doubt Jim could clearly see what I thought of his gleeful, tardy return, and before I got my window fully lowered, he was already sputtering out hastily prepared excuses and apologies for the unplanned purchase and for taking so long in the store. So this package he mansplained while he rested it on his knee, and he pulled out a box and lifted the lid, was a pair of real leather boots. Designed by the store, he said, made right here in Dillon, Montana. Then he continued his timeshare-esque spiel. He cited their uniqueness besides being so soft and comfortable, and he emphasized that he wouldn't find anything he liked as much back home in Utah. Yeah. And I thought he was talking about the boots. Once he shut up, my response was more or less threefold. I stated I'd never seen a men's boot in that shade of breast milk diarrhea. Then I asked if he was sure they were boutique because, and I turned the boot over, the sticker on the sole of the boot said, HO in Mexico. And then I protested his definition of made locally by sharing my opinion that Mexico was not near Dillon, Montana, the esteemed seat of Beaverhead County. These were not Gold Club level boots. $300, but they were copper at best. Poor old chap closed up shop and headed for his door, and he was stepping a lot less buoyantly than before. He looked deflated. He climbed inside the truck and settled in, and then I tried to make a bitchy comment, but honestly, I could only manage to just wheeze across the truck at him. I had spasms of laughter, just choking me. What I was trying to say was that I felt absolutely positive he left some money in that store, but it sure as hell wasn't for any yellow damn boots. My belief was that Tato Head spent his Benjamins on his favorite activity, beaver boosting. It was a local tradition after all. And I hoped he rated at least a copper club because those Fugazi boots cost him plenty. You know, he only made the lamest of attempts to dissuade my narrative. He was basically admitting it, and that spoke volumes. Then I told him I'd rather have spent the wasted hour eating my lunch with Grant in the nearby cemetery than to have sat there like an ignorant stump while he banged a broke store clerk who tricked him twice in one go. At that, he looked over at me and then down at his diminishing lap and slowly shook his big ass head side to side. With a dramatic exhale, Jim called me by my given name. And that's something he rarely did. Jim always addressed me as Mama, which I frickin' hated. It's a term he claimed he used out of respect and affection in reference to me being the mother of his 4 children and a grandmother. This wasn't that. So after I made my insulting remarks to him, he just commenced urging me to go inside the store to check it out, saying how great it was. It was beautiful and interesting. He thought I'd really enjoy seeing it. And then he proffered a really poorly aimed enticement by saying, I should get myself a cute pair of shearling slippers for the winter. Footwear, really? I replied to his offer silently by raising my booted right foot with a silent, no thanks. And then I reminded him of my severe allergy to wool. What an idiot. What an idiot. This was one of those times when, I wasn't deaf to the vibe he was putting off. I could feel it. It was rolling off of him, the energy. I could detect his anger, and he wanted to play a game. I didn't want to play the mouse. I wanted to hit the road, cuddle my new puppy, and go home. But he became relentless. He was offering to stay behind with the dogs while I went in by myself, knowing that that scenario might tempt me, because I would never allow the puppy to be left alone. And it worked. I relented. But instead of leaving little puppy Rosie behind, I grabbed her and took her with me. She was my newest ride or die. But sadly, Jim followed. What an ass! All of my senses, though, had felt heightened by the absurd confrontation with Jim. Even my skin was feeling prickly, and I could not stand that he was trailing right behind me. He was all anticipatory and really chatty. I mean, like a tween with a new video game. With 40 yards to go, I was hobbling reluctantly, and man, I knew this was a mistake. But now I was less furious, and I was kind of curious. This sales girl must really be something. But I hoped she wouldn't ask me what I thought of those boots. With 20 yards to go, every other step in the orthopedic boot shot nerve pain through my lower back, and I muttered to my new little 2-pound friend, why am I here? I can't even buy shoes for another 6 months. I'm so dumb. We crossed the street, Rosie and me, and we pushed through the doors first, leaving Jim 10 yards behind. And as expected, even hoped for, I was hit square in the sniffer with the pungent aroma of leather. Boots, belts, saddles, slippers, each one had a unique scent. Once the first woman from behind the sales counter saw Rosie and loudly cooed over her, every girl in the store rushed me. There were three. Two were wearing wedding bands, and the third, who was much younger, wasn't. But she had a ring on every other finger like she was storing those. I looked at her, and immediately a sudden cold rush and a pressure through the center of my chest told me this was the ugly yellow boots salesgirl. And then my whole body seconded the response. Just then, Jim made his arrival known. He couldn't resist the urge, like any narcissist, to insert himself into this little clutch of women because not even a damn puppy is allowed to be the center of attention when he's around. So at this intrusion, the older saleswoman looked up and she looked slightly annoyed and sounded irritated and asked him if he needed help because, he'd just been there for 45 minutes. Serving himself a big old slice of narcissus pie, the proud owner of the ugliest pair of boots I had ever laid eyes on declared, yes, he was with me. Older saleswoman's face fell on the floor. She turned pale as a sheet, and she turned and looked directly at ugly yellow boot girl's face. And she returned the glance for a millisecond with a look of confusion. I saw this conspicuous little exchange as I turned to face her. It felt as if I had been plugged into a light socket. My ears were ringing. There felt like an air bubble around me. And now this girl was looking at Jim, and she was wearing a shocked expression. I don't know. Maybe that was a look of regret. The whooshing in my inner ears told me that my blood pressure had risen sharply. And the first woman then asked me if I was Jim's wife. And I said yes. And I displayed my puffy left hand with its ugly tungsten passenger on the ring finger. And then she asked me if I had been out in the car that whole time. And she meant while Jim had been in the store shopping, to which again I said yes. So then she looked at Boot Girl with a disgusted expression that found its next target in Jim, gave him a dirty look too. As I was explaining to her that I needed to stay behind in the truck with the dogs and that I hadn't expected it would take Jim so long in the store, she seemed to be kind of comforting and pitying me. But to my right, Boot Girl's slackening jaw told me she'd finally made the leap. She finally realized the wife of her 11 a.m. hookup was standing at her elbow. Bless her heart. So that dramatic exchange was exactly what the liar had eagerly anticipated. But to me, it felt like a fast-moving electrical circuit, sending sparks around our group, immediately followed by heavy, dense silence, like a bubble. Jim just sat there looking so pleased with himself, and he responded disgustingly by overly flirting with her. His cheeks even blushed. His voice grew a little higher pitched, and with every forced attempt to imply an intimacy between them that needed no implication, anyone with half a brain could sense the sexual tension between them. Jim's energy felt dense, and the darkness, it just rolled off of him like hot asphalt fumes snaking through the air. When Jim was the cowboy, he was especially toxic, and he found satisfaction in causing as much pain and discomfort as possible, which had never been more evident. He was leaning into his tendency towards sadism. So, disgust and revulsion aside, I gave that round to him and I hobbled right into his trap. And rather than preserve a shred of my dignity by staying in the dang truck, I did the predictable thing and satisfied my curiosity. To this day, I can't smell leather without being reminded of Dillon, Montana. Hence, I also have never bought another new pair of boots. So after that, man, I was ripe for some good vibes, and I hadn't had a psychic reading in over a year. But instead of calling Peter, I decided to see someone new, someone different. At the time I met with Aspen, who was a friend of my daughter Rachel's, I was in a highly emotional and a very unstable place, to be sure, and it felt like a bit of fun to explore other practitioners. But the primary reason I chose Aspen was simply because she wanted to gain experience. So I'm going to end our story there. And thanks for being here. In episode 19, you'll hear an incredible reading with Aspen. If you want to know more, please remember to like, follow, and share to take my story one step closer to publication. And ladies, I invite you to step out of the darkness and into your power.